Book Mountain. On Friday morning, Pat called on Ted Glenn to borrow his drill. Then he cycled round again to Miss Hubbard's place after tea to put the shelves up. It was like a jigsaw puzzle, fitting those shelves into Miss Hubbard's alcoves. No matter how Pat juggled with them, some of the shelves just wouldn't fit. So Miss Hubbard got the old saw out of the garden shed and put some newspaper on the kitchen floor and some more on the table and said, "You carry on with that drilling, Pat, and I'll saw some bits off these shelves until they fit. I used to be quite handy with a saw. I'll soon get the knack again." She did get the knack, but not until she'd sawn a few bits off the table as well. Pat carried on with the drilling. He fitted brackets into all the alcoves to hold the shelves. Then they slotted the shelves into place. "They look really smart," said Miss Hubbard. "But we have 3 shelves left over," said Pat. "I can't understand it. I counted them so carefully when I made my list." "Never mind," said Miss Hubbard. "I'll make a bedside table with what's left over. I'm just beginning to enjoy this sawing. I think we've earned a cup of tea. What do you say, Pat?" "Oh, just the job," said Pat. "But I must see what the shelves look like with the books on them," said Miss Hubbard. "Let's just fill this lot over here." "Right," said Pat. "Let's put these encyclopedias on them. They are really heavy. They'll be a good test." So they did. Then they stood back to admire their work. "Don't they look impressive?" said Miss Hubbard. "It'll be like a real library when they're all sorted out and tidied up." "Thank you ever so much, Pat. I'm sure I could never have done it on my own. Now, let's put that kettle on." They sat in the kitchen amongst the piles of books and had homemade biscuits and banana cake with lemon tea. It was all delicious. Miss Hubbard was just pouring a 3rd cup of tea and showing Pat her favourite poetry books when there was a tremendous crash from the sitting room. They rushed in to see what had happened. There was a mountain of books in the middle of the floor with pieces of wood sticking up amongst them, like the masts and spars of a sinking ship. "Whatever?" said Miss Hubbard. "It's the shelves," said Pat. "Fallen down," said Miss Hubbard. "What a mess," said Pat. "It's a good thing we hadn't tidied them properly," said Miss Hubbard. Pat looked at the holes in the wall where the screws had been. "They've just pulled out with the weight," said Pat. "You said it would be a good test," said Miss Hubbard. There was a knock at the door. It was Ted. "Hello," he said. "I popped in to see how you're getting on with the shelves." "Come and see," said Miss Hubbard. Ted climbed over the book mountain to see. "Looks as if you've had a disaster," he said. Then he had a good look at the wood, and the holes in the wall, and the screws. "That's your problem," he said. "What?" said Pat. "Screws," said Ted. "Screws?" said Pat. "Too short," said Ted. "You used 1 inches, and you need 2 inches for a job like that. There's a lot of weight there. 1 inches won't hold it." "It's these millimetres," said Pat. "They get me muddled. It was in millimetres on the packet." "All right," said Ted. 50 millimetres. Same thing. I bet young Tom and Katie could have told you. They do that at school nowadays." "Oh, dear," said Pat. "I've made a fist of it." "Don't worry," said Ted. "I'll soon fix it. It just so happens I've got my toolkit in the Land Rover, and I've got plenty of 50 screws. I use 'em all the time." "Thanks, Ted," said Pat. "You're a marvel." "I'll make some fresh tea," said Miss Hubbard. "Could we have Thai foo, please?" said Ted. "I don't like this lemon tea. It's as weak as 1-inch screws." "Thai foo it shall be," said Miss Hubbard. "Oh, and another thing," said Ted, looking again at the holes Pat had drilled in the wall. "What?" said Pat. "You used the wrong size drill." "Oh, dear," said Pat. "I'd better stick to letters in future." "Not a bit of it," said Ted. "You'll get it right next time you put some shelves up." Ted soon had the shelves up again, and this time they did not fall down. I don't think they ever will. It was a fine warm day on Monday. When Pat called on Miss Hubbard with her letters, he was surprised to see that most of her books were dotted about the garden in small heaps. "I'm having my big sort-out," said Miss Hubbard, "and there isn't enough room in the house to do it." "That's a good idea," said Pat. "How are the shelves?" "Fine," said Miss Hubbard, "just fine. Could you pop these books on that pile by the apple tree, please, Pat? That's right. You see, it's poetry under the apple tree, history by the rockery, short stories by the pond, novels by the rhubarb, and so on." "Great," said Pat. "Have you got anything on fishing? I'm going fishing with Ted in his boat on Saturday, and I don't know a thing about fish." "Not a thing," said Miss Hubbard, "unless you count the Bible." "It might be a help," said Pat, "if a storm blows up. Good luck with the sorting. Cheerio!" Pat was on his way, and he remembered to ask the twins about millimetres when he called at the school. As Ted had said, they knew all about them. "Easy," said Tom, and showed Pat a ruler with millimetres marked on it. "Look," said Katy. She held an old ruler marked in inches next to it, so that he could compare the two. "I'd still rather have inches," said Pat. "They're less likely to make shelves fall down."